Hello, welcome to FND's Best Practices for Inclusion. I'd like to welcome you here today. My name is Kibwana Wright, and I am the Northeast Florida's parent trainer. And so I'm here today under dual hats. First, as a professional with over 20 years of experience working with families with children with disabilities. And secondly, as a parent with children who had disabilities. And so it was through a conversation that I had with another parent about some of the challenges that she was facing with her child in the general education process. And it was through that conversation that I realized many of our experiences were the same, and that maybe I should get my child evaluated. And so it was from that conversation that I had my child evaluated, and we were, so to speak, thrusted into the special education process. And so through this period, I was able to help teach my child how to advocate for herself, as I also learned how to advocate on her behalf. And so it is so important that organizations like FND that are parent driven are available to help other parents like yourselves. So a little bit about FND. FND is a 501c3 organization, meaning we do not work for any local or state federal agencies or any schools. We are funded in part by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health. We offer free services for persons with disabilities, their family members, concerned citizens, or any professionals. We service persons with disabilities from birth to age 26. We are a statewide parent training information center, or a PTI, and the statewide family to family health information center. Like I said earlier, FND is family driven. We were founded in 1985 by parents of children with disabilities who came together looking for mutual supports and sharing of information. Family Network on Disabilities is a national network for individuals of all ages who may be at risk, have disabilities, or have special needs and their families. We also serve professionals and concerned citizens. FND is unique because the majority of our board members, our program staff, our management staff, and our field staff are all family members or persons with disabilities. And so FND, let me share what FND is not, okay? FND is not we are not attorneys. We are not doctors. So nothing that we say here today during any of our workshops can be considered as medical or legal advice. We are excited, however, to share with you evidence-based materials, resources, and supports for you and your family, information that is research-based to create our trainings. And we encourage you to collaborate with schools and agencies. So let's get into best practices for inclusion. Okay. We'll talk about the legal requirements and that since 1975, federal law has required that students with disabilities have access to school and a free, appropriate public education. In December 2004, Congress reformed and renamed the law. The new law, Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, or IDEA 2004, continues to require school districts to educate children in the least restrictive environment possible. Florida statutes offer parallel language stating that special classes, separate schooling, or removal of exceptional education students from the regular classroom shall occur only when the nature or severity of the handicap cannot be satisfactorily accommodated with supplementary aids and services in the regular classroom. The emphasis on participation in the general education curriculum is intended to focus the attention on the accommodations or modifications necessary to enable students with disabilities to access the general education curricula, as well as strong presumption in favor of a regular classroom placement. First, the extent to which an individual student participates in the regular education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services is determined on a case-by-case basis by an individual education plan or IEP team. This requires individualized inquiry into the unique educational needs of each student and the supports that would enable the students to be educated satisfactorily in the regular education environment before a more restrictive placement is considered. Though the regular classroom is the first placement option for special education services to be considered, federal regulations and state laws also recognize that additional placement options may be necessary. Florida statute states that a continuum of alternative exceptional education placement shall be available. This portion of the law is designed to ensure that each student is educated in the least restrictive environment, that it is appropriate for a least restrictive environment appropriate for each student. Among specific options within the continuum are supplementary consultation, a resource room, a special class, a special day school, or a hospital, homebound instruction. So the history of the inclusion movement. The philosophies guiding special education have changed in the last 3 decades. And they also continue to change, particularly in the United States. A large part of this transformation is based upon the idea that students with disabilities should receive their education in the least restrictive environment. In fact, in the US, the requirement that education takes place in the least restrictive environment was put forth in the Education for All Handicapped Children in 1975. According to this act, students with disabilities from ages 5 to 21 are required to be educated with their peers without disabilities to the maximum extent possible, regardless of the nature or the severity of their disabilities. Therefore, the term mainstreaming emerged as a term to be described to describe the practices of educating students with the least restrictive environment for students with disabilities at that time. The practice of mainstreaming emerged in 1975 after the EHA was introduced a new philosophy designed to ensure that students with disabilities would receive their education in the least restrictive environment, particularly for students with mild disabilities. Initially, the mainstreaming philosophy emphasized that students with mild disabilities should receive their education in a general education setting, but did not take into consideration students with moderate or severe disabilities. Mainstreaming was based on the concept that students would spend a part of their day visiting a general education classroom and attending extracurricular activities while throughout the day, and do some of their non-academic activities such as lunch or recess or physical education, music, and art in another place. Therefore, the major benefit of mainstreaming was to allow students with disabilities to receive special education services in a self-contained classroom, while at the same time participating with their typically developing peers in a non-academic activity, allowing students with and without disabilities to learn from each other. The EHA legislation was amended and renamed in 1990 as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which also supported educating students with disabilities alongside their peers in their neighborhood public schools. The Individuals with Disability Education Improvement Act of 2004, IDEIA, again mandated that students with disabilities should be educated with typically developing students in the general education classes to the greatest extent possible. Additionally, IDEIA re-emphasize that students with disabilities should only be placed in separate classes or schools when the nature or the severity of their disabilities is such that they could not receive an appropriate level of education in the general education classroom with supplementary aids and services. Therefore, this law guaranteed the right of all students with disabilities to receive their education in the least restrictive environment, as stated in the federal law. And in Florida, since 2013, there is a definition for inclusion. Inclusion is much more than scheduling students with disabilities or SWDs in a general education classroom. It means that all students with disabilities have a civil right to be together for instruction and learning, regardless of their disability label. And that collaborative integrated services are planned and provided by the district and the school level education teams across disciplines. Students who make progress in general education environments are provided the appropriate services and support to learn academic and functional skills with the context of core curriculum content and activities. When inclusive practices are effectively implemented, students with disabilities develop skills for independent living. They develop skills for college and career readiness, and develop meaningful and reciprocal relationships with same-age peers without disabilities. So the term best practices has been used to describe what works in a particular situation or environment when data support the success of a practice. It is referred to as a research-based practice or scientifically based practice. As good consumers of information, we must keep in mind that a particular practice may or may not yield the same results across educational environments. Grover J. Whitehurst, as an Assistant Secretary for Education, Research, and Improvement, says that evidence-based education as the integration of professional wisdom with the best available empirical evidence in making decisions about how to deliver instruction. Professional wisdom allows educators and family members to adapt to specific circumstances or environments in an area which research evidence may be absent or incomplete. But without at least some empirical evidence, education cannot resolve competing approaches, generate cumulative knowledge, or avoid fads and personal biases. So the Florida Inclusion Network, or FIN, collaborates with all districts and schools to provide customized services and supports, ensuring that all students with disabilities have the same educational, social, and future opportunities as their peers. In partnerships with districts, the Florida Inclusion Network, or FIN, facilitates the implementation of inclusive best practices through data-driven, student-focused planning and problem solving across the district and schools, data-driven professional development and technical assistance to increase knowledge and the skills of district and school personnel, coaching and resources for district and school personnel to sustain inclusive best practices, sharing information to build collaborative relationships between families, schools, and districts. So best practices for inclusive education, or BPI, is led by the FIN facilitator for a FIN or a FIN trained leader. The school best practices for inclusive education assessment, or BPI assessment, is a school self-assessment process designed to identify priority needs. It develops goals. It plans improvement strategies and organizes resources to support and implement best practices, inclusive best practices for students with disabilities. The school BPI results are used at the school and are also embedded in the school district's plan for inclusive education. The BPI includes 34 indicators of inclusive practices that are aligned with the district level BPI. These are categorized within the following 3 domains. We have leadership, decision-making, instruction and student achievement, communication, and collaboration. A FIN facilitator or a FIN trained leader assists the school team, which is selected by the school. Administrators in reviewing and rating the school BPI indicators based on the final team. Assessment ratings, priorities, indicators are identified in short-term and long-term improvement short-term and long-term improvement plans. Strategies are developed to improve and increase inclusive practices across the school. Best practices for inclusive education, or BPI, is a district level self-assessment and FIN facilitated process to identify and prioritize areas of need for inclusive practices that enable all students with disabilities to achieve their highest potential. The BPI processes are based on work by experts in the field, best practices literature, and peer-reviewed research. When implemented with fidelity and informed by the school level BPI assessment team, the BPI process leads to the development of a plan for inclusive education, reflecting the short-term and long-term improvement efforts that increases the effectiveness of the inclusive practices across the district. The Florida Inclusion Network provides support for the implementation of BPI and the related plans for inclusive education in all Florida districts. The BPI indicators are inclusive practices. The BPI indicators of inclusive practices that are aligned with the school and district level BPI are categorized again in 3 domains, and that was the leadership and decision-making, instruction and student achievement, communication, and collaboration. And so leadership and decision-making, where on the school level, I'm just going to go through real quick and give you a few samples of what it looks like on the school, at the school level, and at the district level. And so under these are the best practices, inclusive education identified by the Florida Inclusion Network and included in the assessment to the schools and the district. Okay, so leadership on the school level might be the school administrator, the principal and assistant principal, that they are making sure that the teachers are going through the necessary classes to strengthen some of their their practices or methods and approaches to inclusion, where the district makes sure that the school has the resources to help their teachers to go through the professional development to strengthen their um, uh, uh, their methods and their approaches to inclusion. Okay, so that's leadership and decision making. And we have here instruction and student achievement, where there is a school-wide approach to planning and implementing a universal design for learning across all instructional and non-instructional school contexts. And then on the district level, they might have the data for all of that so that the school knows how to go about implementing. So again, the school makes sure that the professional development and the implementation, where the district then comes and provides the resources, they provide the data, they provide the federal funding and so on and so forth, so that the schools can do what they need to do. Communication and collaboration, where the school reports progress towards implementing inclusive practices, and that those practices are, or that information is disseminated to the families and to the school district personnel or to community members annually, where the school district disseminates information to all families in the same manner and all at the same time. So that the communication among the school might be more centered around their population. It's more student-centered. It's more based off of what the demographics of their population is, where the district just sends out something and it does it for everyone, and it does it all at the same time. It's not so much centered around the types of students or the types of families. So that's the difference between communication and collaboration on a school level and on a district level. So this collaboration occurs when educators work together and support each other in the effort to provide the highest quality curriculum and instruction for all the students that they serve. Inclusion requires collaboration between the general and the special education teachers, the paraprofessionals, related service providers, and the families. Teachers must work together and share responsibilities for the ongoing assessments, instruction, and achievements for all the students. Effective teams regularly consult, plan, and problem solve to analyze the needs of their students. In inclusive schools, family members are viewed as partners in the decision-making process. Figuring out how, when, where to provide the right types and the right amounts of support involves planning by teams that include the general and education teachers, administrators, and other key staff members. Together, they must develop a school-wide schedule based on the analysis of the student needs rather than labels. By using a student-centered approach to scheduling, teams ensure that existing school staff and resources are aligned to meet the needs of all the students and provide teachers with opportunities for collaboration. And we just even saw that when we talked about those three domains and we talked about communication and collaboration. And so this is a great example of that right here. School leaders can support collaboration by defining and developing each teacher's role in the inclusive classroom. Effective leaders create a culture of trust by providing ongoing team-focused learning opportunities that support best practices for inclusive education. And so highlights from the ESSA 2015. And ESSA is Every Student Succeeds Act. It was signed by President Obama on December 10th, 2015, and represents good news for our nation's schools. This bipartisan measure reauthorizes the 50-year-old Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, the nation's national education law for a longstanding commitment to equal opportunity for all students. All students are considered as general education students first. So regardless of how that child comes through or what disability that child comes through the door with, they are first considered as general education students. All students must be taught to high academic standards that will prepare them to succeed in college and careers. Students with disabilities are to be included in accountability measures, and appropriate accommodations must be provided to improve the rates of inclusion of students with disabilities in regular assessments. So schools can't say, oh, we have so many children with disabilities and not include them in those numbers when they're even going for ratings. They have to include those students. Students must address the needs of those at risk of not meeting the high state academic standards through implementation of evidence-based interventions, activities, and strategies. Schools use technology consistent with the principles of universal design for learning to support the learning needs of all students, including students with disabilities. And if you would like more information about ESSA, you can go to the Department of Education's website and put www.ed.gov/ESSA. So the standard curricula should be adopted or modified to fit the needs of individual students. And that right there is equity. The majority of the students with disabilities are expected to meet general education curriculum requirements with appropriate instruction and accommodations provided in the general education classroom, with supports through consultation, support facilitation, co-teaching, and learning labs. Trained and knowledgeable teachers from both special and general education coming together at initial planning stages to make the standard curriculum accessible to all learners. Some educational practices that support inclusion are differentiated instruction, collaborative teaching, flexible grouping, universal design for learning, assistive instruction, instructional technology, tiered lessons, cooperative learning, accommodations and modifications, positive behavior supports, visual supports, and peer supports. And so inclusive education has benefits for all involved. Researchers have established a significant body of evidence that points to the mutual rewards of inclusive schooling. When children with disabilities have opportunities for repeated interactions with their typical peers, they have demonstrated improvement in skill, areas of communication, socialization, reading, mathematical problem solving, writing, and spelling, as well as functional skills of everyday living. When typical peers are given opportunities to tutor or assist others, they have been found to have more positive attitudes toward human differences, to show greater tolerance for people in general, and to have improved self-esteem, and to be much more likely to engage in relationships with people with disabilities in their adult lives. So, who benefits from inclusion? All students do. Students with disabilities will improve social and communication skills, increase academic achievement and positive behavior, foster the development of relationship with peers without disabilities at school and in their communities. And students without disabilities will engage in academic tasks at a higher and deeper level, benefit from the strategies used to support students with disabilities, increase awareness and sensitivity to human needs, differences, and diversity, and social justice. And educators will also benefit by becoming more skilled in teaching all students, learn to share responsibility for educating all students, develop more satisfying and professional relationships. So inclusive models promote more creative and efficient use of existing resources. All students with disabilities must have access to general education curriculum. In Florida, this means all students must receive instruction aligned with Florida standards and Next Generation Sunshine State standards. Students with disabilities access the general curriculum through the use of universal design for learning, differentiation in instructional methods, individualized accommodations and supports to enhance learning, participation in the Florida Standard Assessment, FSA, with accommodations as designed by the IEP. A very small number of students with significant cognitive disabilities access the general education through access points that are aligned with the standards. This decision is made by the IEP team and requires written consent from the student's parents. Access points can be used in any setting. Students who use access points will access the standards through curriculum modifications based on access points and Florida standards. Participation in Florida Standards Alternative Assessments, or FSAA, aligned with access points and Florida standards. Each student provides details about the specifically designed instruction, supports, and services that the student receives and indicates goals and necessary accommodations or modifications. So all students, including students with disabilities, learn at different rates and have a wide array of prior knowledge of concepts and require a variety of levels of teacher support. Differentiated instruction is the teacher's proactive response to each learner's needs. Shaped by a mindset, this framework for effective teaching dates back to the one-room schoolhouse, which, you know, you would watch like Little House on the Prairie, and everyone is in one room. And that teacher would have to modify their supports based on the level of each student. And this is used by students to meet a vast range of diverse student needs. This is proactive. It is based on quality and not quantity. It's rooted in assessment. It's taking multiple approaches to concepts, to content, processes, and products of an environment. It is student-centered. It is a blend of whole class and group and individual instruction all in one. Providing students with choices and options about their learning and assessments while using flexible grouping and authentic lessons is a cornerstone of differentiated approaches. So you have flexible grouping. Flexible grouping is important in proactive instructional planning as well, to ensure that students have the opportunity to work with a wide variety of peers. Students should be able to work with others who share the same or different interests, readiness needs, learning approaches, or who are assigned randomly to a group by teachers or by student choices. There are many different grouping arrangements that can be incorporated as students work towards a learning target: small groups, triads, pairs, etc. All right, and we have a specially designed instruction. And the Individuals with Disability Act, IDEA, defines specialty designed instruction as adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child. The content, methodology, and delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and ensure the access of the child to general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards within the jurisdiction of public agency that apply to all children. So SDI, or specifically designed instruction, is the unique set of supports determined for a student with a disability by the Individual Education Plan, or IEP team, and is provided to remove barriers by making progress in the general education curriculum that are caused by the student's disability. So again, this removes the barriers that they may have that would cause them not to make progress. So the supports are infused throughout the student's learning experiences and environments as described in the IEP. So a teacher certified in exceptional student education, or ESE, and related service providers with specialization in the area of need have a primary responsibility in collaboration with the general education teacher to plan, implement, and monitor the specially designed instruction. The SDI may be implemented through direct services, consultation, co-teaching, support facilitation, co-planning, coaching, monitoring, or oversight to other educators who are delivering the SDI. Ultimately, all students with disabilities are always considered general education students first, who receive additional supports via specifically designed instruction based on a continuum of services. I really like that definition. So collaborative teaching is a style for direct interaction between at least two co-equal parties, voluntarily engaged in shared decision-making as they work toward a common goal. It starts with the belief that what is done together can be better than what each could do alone, and includes the growth of trust, respect, and a sense of community. This concept is true for all students, but is particularly true and important when collaborating to provide specially designed instruction to students with disabilities in the general education setting. So why should general education and special education teachers collaborate? IDEA and Florida statutes both require access to general education curriculum for students with disabilities. Teachers and schools are accountable for the achievement of all students. So again, they can't leave out, when they're doing that rating of the school, they can't leave out these students. How much they're achieving counts and matters as well. Direct services for students with disabilities are provided in the least restrictive environment. And for the most, this is the general education classroom. Most students with IEPs and most students with IEPs and many without will need varying degrees of additional support to progress in general education curriculum. Again, it's student-centered. So what does inclusion look like? Here in this example, you have Tyrone, who is an energetic 9-year-old fourth grader who loves sports and goes right from school to the soccer practice every day with a group of his classmates. Tyrone has learning disabilities and his reading comprehension is at an early second grade level. He needs special education services, but like most kids, the last thing he wants to do is to be different. In another school, he might have been taken out of class every day for special instruction, making getting the help he needs seem like a punishment. Fortunately, the principal at Tyrone's school understands the benefit of inclusion. In Tyrone's fourth grade class, the general education teacher uses flexible groupings of students for different activities. She plans lessons using universal design for learning principles so everyone can learn. For reading, Tyrone receives additional supports in small groups, but he doesn't have to leave the classroom. His exceptional student education ESE teacher provides specially designed instruction in the general education classroom for him and a few other students. Every week, Tyrone's teacher plans ways to adapt the instruction or materials to help Tyrone and others learn. Tyrone's parents meet with the teacher to share ideas about what works for him. School and home are partnering to support Tyrone. So that is an idea of what inclusion looks like. So we are at the end, so let me tell you a little bit again about FND. This slide represents our FND family. These are the programs housed under Family Network on Disabilities. Each program provides unique services to a specific population. PTIs, or the program, is funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Offices of Special Education Programs. Poppin, which I am the Poppin PTI, we serve North Florida. PSN serves Central and Southwest Florida. Penn serves Central and Southeast Florida. The Family Star program, funded by the U.S. Department of Health under Health Resources and Services Administration. Family Star, the program will assist families of children and youth with special health care needs to make informed decisions about health care and their children, providing supports and resources. So on our website, which is www.fndusa.org, you can find a plethora of downloadables, tip sheets, information sheets on special education, the special education process in Florida. And so once you go there, you can just click on the ESE downloadable resources, and you can receive those in Spanish. You can receive those in Spanish. You can receive those in, I think it's Russian and French. And so there's many languages and there is a lot of information, okay? You can find us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We also have FND University, which is a non-credited online system specifically designed to help parents and professionals learn more about the special education at their own pace. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me here today. You being here with me has made such a significant impact in the life of your child. And so I appreciate you joining me. If you need any information or help, you give us a call. The number is down below. You can reach us through the website, or you can give us a call or email us. So thank you so much for joining me here today. You have a great day. Thank you.